members. Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just remember, Mr. President, cold is a state of mind. So we're Minnesotans and we're hardy. And with that in mind, I've got a very hot bill here. I'd like to move that Senate File 797 be withdrawn from the Committee on Labor and Industry Policy and re-referred to the Committee on Higher Education, Finance and Policy. Mr. President, this is the Teachers of Color Higher Ed bill. And it does involve work, but not the kind that goes to that committee. It's a higher ed topic. I've spoken to the committees and everybody who cares, and they're all good with it. Thank you.
Okay. And Senator Abler, this is you're the chief author of this.
I am the chief author, Mr. Chair.
Discussion on the Abler motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bill be made for special orders for immediate consideration. I believe the sheet is on the desk. If
members, the sheet is on its way to your desk, or they're on the desk. They're either on the desk or on the way to the desk. But members, the first bill up for consideration is number 21 on general orders, Senate File 749. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill was drafted in response to the concerns of the governor that had been expressed to leadership well over a month ago. At that point in time, communities were reluctant to re-enter into their mutual aid agreements with the city of Minneapolis with over concerns about being paid. And as a result of that, we then have taken the liberty of putting together this bill that very simply takes money that a community who receives local government aid, if they do not pay the money that is owed to those communities that have provided mutual aid, upon proper certification by the communities to whom the money is owed, the state then can withhold money from the local government aid and compensate those communities. This was done as a result, as I mentioned, of the concern for communities that they would not be paid. And it was also done in light of the fact that there had been in excess of a 10% reduction made in the police budget for the city of Minneapolis. I recognize that there are those who disagree with this, but let's remember the basic reason for local government aid. It is to ensure that cities can meet their most basic responsibilities in terms of the services that they provide to their constituents. First and foremost, safety. I do want to mention that there is no proposed change to local government aid. Every community would get the same amount of local government aid that they are projected to get under the current formula, and that this situation would only arise in those instances when communities do not compensate those who provide mutual aid to them. This does not go back on past costs, but rather this proceeds from the future in all future situations. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand down and let anyone else comment.
Discussion on Senate File 749. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A10 amendment. It might be filed under Senator Dietzig's name. The A10 amendment.
Senator Murphy offers the A10 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Murphy moves to amend Senate File number 749 as follows: delete everything after the enacting clause and insert. This is the A10 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Murphy.
Mr. President, I have the A12, an amendment to the amendment, please.
Senator Murphy offers the A12 amendment to the amendment. The Secretary will report the A12 amendment to the amendment.
Senator Murphy moves to amend the Murphy amendment to Senate File 749 as follows: page 3 after line 10, insert. This is the A12 amendment to the amendment.
Just so everyone's clear, members, we're on the A12 amendment to the A10 amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator Johnson, for what reason do you rise?
point of order here. Could we have Senator Murphy describe the A10 amendment prior to moving to amend the amendment?
Senator Murphy, we're on the A12 amendment to the amendment. We'll allow Senator Murphy to explain the amendment to the amendment, and if there are additional questions, they can certainly be asked at that time. So Senator Murphy, to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. We heard Senate File 749 in the Property Tax Subcommittee and in the Taxes Committee. This is a proposal before us about mutual aid. It is built upon a claim that there are unpaid bills from one city to another in the wake of a disaster. There's been no testimony in support of that claim, and yet we are here today bringing a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Mutual aid has been a tool we have used across the state, whether it is neighborhood by neighborhood, family by family, or community by community, when our communities have experienced trouble or disaster. We could list for a long time the examples in the state of Minnesota where we have seen such examples of disaster: the St. Peter and Comfrey tornado, the Northern Meadows fire, the flood in St. Charles, the trouble in Medelia, the shooting in Buffalo last weekend. There are many examples where mutual aid is employed to bring assets and support to communities. It is rooted in a Minnesota value, the value that we look out for each other, and when we're in trouble, we stand up for each other. We are here together for the people, serving and working with the people. The amendment that I am bringing offers a better way to resolve disputes between communities. It creates a dispute resolution process through the Office of Complaint and Dispute Resolution. It is built on the very same principle of mutual aid. And if there are two communities who have fought together through a disaster, and there are unpaid claims or claims of unpaid bills, that should go to the Office of Dispute Resolution, rather than, as Senator Weber's bill does, takes a punitive after the fact approach and garnishes LGA from a community. When we garnish LGA from a community, we are taking away the resources that Senator Weber so aptly described. LGA ensures communities the basic needs that they're able to be met. If after disaster we say we're going to dock your LGA because we don't think you've done something right, we're taking away the ability of that community to do exactly what we're expecting LGA to do. This amendment, the amendment to the amendment, creates a dispute resolution process. It builds on our ability together to resolve our differences. I think it is a far superior instrument in this case, and it is why I'm asking for your support. And Mr. President, I'd ask for a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Roll call granted. Any discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Murphy yield for question?
Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Johnson.
On line 1.19 of the A12 amendment, there is an Office of Collaboration Dispute Resolution. Would the author please describe some of the activities of that office? I am unfamiliar with that particular institution.
Senator Murphy. Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Johnson. The office has been in place for many years. It is a place where municipalities, where agencies, where communities can come together without a judicial process to have a mediation and a resolution in the most simplistic way possible. It brings expertise and a third-party neutral mediator so that the community can swiftly and effectively resolve their differences.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And would Senator Murphy continue to yield?
She will. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the reasons I probably have not heard of it is I'm not familiar with any cases that have been before that particular office before. Could you describe a couple of examples of actual cases that have come before that in recent times?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Johnson. You know, there would be any number of examples. I wish I could describe one for you, but I did not bring those examples with me. I'm sure that you are able to look that up. It'd be pretty easy to find. But it is, when we think about dispute resolution, the least judicial, the most accessible, and the most efficient way for two parties to come together, find a mediated solution, and resolve it. And for our communities, especially in a tender moment post-disaster, it is the most respectful and efficient way for those disputes to be rendered.
Next, I have Senator Weber, followed by Senator Nelson, followed by Senator Dietzig. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, as I look at these amendments, it talks about an amount being paid by the Commissioner of Revenue. Exactly where do those amounts come from? Are they withholding local government aid from someone else in order to make this compensation, or are they taking it directly from the city to whom the amount is, to whom is supposed to pay the amount? I would have a question for Senator Murphy, if she would yield.
Mr. President, point of order. We're on the amendment to the amendment, not the underlying amendment.
Senator Weber, members, if you're asking another member to yield, please do that at the beginning of your statement so the member can hear your question. Senator Weber, are you asking Senator Murphy to yield?
Yes, Mr. President, I am.
Okay, Senator Murphy, will you yield? Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Weber, please state your question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Basically, what I am asking about is the question about the monies that would be paid by the Commissioner of Revenue. That is actually handled by Amendment A10, and I guess as the author of the original bill, at this point, I would be in opposition to the A12 amendment, and we'll go over to the next one when necessary.
Okay, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I rise in a question to the A12 amendment. It seems that the A11 was more of a bridge amendment to get here to the A12, but the A12 amendment does appear to address the issue that Senator Weber is addressing in a very different way, and that is what the amendment's author said as well. And my question is, has this had any hearings? I don't know too many members on the floor that know exactly about what dispute resolutions are. Senator Murphy, are you familiar with any public hearings on this amendment to the bridge amendment? Senator Murphy.
Senator Nelson and members, just a reminder, if you're going to ask a member to yield, please do so at the beginning of your statement so that member can hear the question. So Senator Nelson, are you asking Senator Murphy to yield?
Thank you, Mr. President, for the refresher. Yes, I'm asking Senator Murphy to yield. Okay,
Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Nelson, please state your question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Murphy. My question has to do with the A12 amendment to the bridge amendment. What I'd like to know, Senator Murphy, is what type of public awareness, testimony, discussion has there been on this resolution of dispute section?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Nelson. As I mentioned, we took this piece of legislation up just last week in the Property Tax Subdivision and then in the Taxes Committee. As you know, Senator Nelson is the chair of that committee. So it's had 2 hearings. We, in this body, experience disputes all the time. We know a lot about dispute resolution. The Office of Complaint and Dispute Resolution is an office that's been in place for a very long time. So while I understand this amendment has not had an additional public hearing besides the one we're having right now, it is not a brand new idea, and in fact, it is something that we're familiar with all the time. And what I am saying is that the proposal in Senator Weber's bill which is meant to answer a claim that has not been testified to, that there's an unpaid bill, that is meant to solve a problem that we don't even know exists. Rather than that, why don't we use a tried and true practice of mediated dispute resolution, building on what we know works, a Minnesota value, we work together, we find a solution. If we have faith in our communities, which I do across the state of Minnesota, Comfrey, Madelia, St. Charles, the Red River Valley, and yes, Minneapolis, if we have faith in those communities, we know that if given the opportunity, they will resolve their differences if they have them. We do not need to insert ourselves into that resolution with a punitive measure that seeks to continue to harm the very community that needs the help. So I am happy to debate this idea for as long as you'd like, because it's a good one. I think it is a better solution to the problem that has been defined. It is one that is rooted in our values, and I'm really grateful for the question, Senator Nelson.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Murphy. Well, this floor is about debate. There's no doubt about that. However, I take from your answer that there has been no public awareness nor debate about this particular issue. I would suggest that there will be other bills coming before this body through the normal committee process, at which point the public will be aware, senators will be aware, and there will be that great debate. This is difficult to have in a very remote setting where not all senators are on the floor, bridge amendments are offered, then another amendment to the amendment, without any full public disclosure. So, Mr. President, I do hope going forward that we can seek to be more transparent and seek to bring the public in, particularly on something as important as public safety and as important as we all know that is.
Next, we have Senator Dietzick, followed by Senator Dibble. Senator Dietzick.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I was going to just share a little bit more about the Office of Dispute Resolution. And so both the League has worked with them when trying to figure out ways to resolve differences between communities, and communities have gone to them themselves. And as an example, one that I'm aware of is Hastings. The community around Hastings has some special service districts, and the different communities were kind of having a disagreement on how much money each should be paying for this special service district. And so rather than sue each other and rather than go into more litigious background, they went to the Office of Dispute Resolution and worked it out. And so that is just one example of where they're already doing this. And so I support Senator Murphy's amendment because I do think that it brings it brings a process of where we could all work together. And so rather than having the state auditor have to be the judge and jury to figure out what goes on, and rather than have different communities feel like, well, I don't know if I want to provide mutual aid and I don't know if I want to support them because what if I can't have a backstop? So 108 communities do not get LGA. So what if everybody starts to decide, well, you know what, I'm not going to help that community because I'm not sure I'm going to get paid. So this provides just a less litigious and a less mean and divisive way to help resolve some of those issues. And the discussion about going to another hearing, well, we did actually, I believe Senator Murphy did request that the bill go to the state government finance so we would know if this had an impact on the state auditor's budget. And that was denied, and so, I think the bill could use more hearing. The underlying bill could use more hearings, but I think this is we wanted to present a solution that we think this is a better solution to, a problem that might not exist. The League has said that they don't know of where there's any back and forth concerns about different communities paying, and so we think that this amendment, this A12 amendment, is a good resolution. Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. The final point that Senator Dietzich made was the point that I wanted to bring up, which was in response to Senator Nelson's objection and urging of further transparency and more deliberation and public input and transparency and disclosure, the minority party attempted to do just that when Senator Murphy objected to the committee report last week and asked that the bill be referred to state government so that we could have this very discussion. So Senator Nelson, we agree. And this is what happens in this body when the majority party thwarts the rights and the ideas of the minority party and ramrods its bills through and objects to the efforts on the part of those of us with good ideas, good ways to make legislation better. When I first came to this Senate, that's what we did. There were a lot of legislators around here who belonged to different parties who gathered around the table in good faith and had really, really frank and difficult, contested discussions about ideas for legislation. And we listened to each other. I saw numerous instances in committee where good ideas were offered and people moderated and modified their perspective and agreed to those ideas, and legislation was changed. I would even venture to say, Mr. President, that bills of mine that I thought were brilliant and perfect upon introduction were made better by the process of debate and amendment and public input, transparency and disclosure. So Senator Nelson, when you stand up and object to Senator Murphy offering an amendment like this on the floor, think about what happened last week when she objected to the referral of this legislation to another committee so that we could have this discussion in committee. So here we are on the floor having the discussion because that is the only option and outlet we have available on behalf of the public to do something that frankly is an excellent idea, to send this kind of of dispute between communities to the Office of Dispute Resolution, which, by the way, members, is the office upon which we rely to staff and promote civility in this very body. Those are the folks who help us with all of that work. They provide all the staffing for our Civility Caucus. So that's who they are, for those of you who aren't familiar. And if you're not familiar with them, become familiar with them. Look on the website. I was just scanning through the website. So many instances in community after community, major institutions and leadership in our communities with very, very serious differences of opinion, disputes that threaten to tear the fabric of those communities apart. This office brings the parties together around a table to work through those conflicts and find mutually agreeable solutions and reconnects and reestablishes that fabric and those connections we have to each other as citizens, as leaders, as members of the Minnesota family. So it really chafes my hide when the majority gets up and objects to the ideas we bring on the floor when they've already quashed and thwarted our ability to have those ideas brought forward into the full light of day in a committee process, as Senator Nelson was articulating so eloquently earlier. Thank you, Mr. President.
I have Senator Howe, followed by Senator Nelson. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And would, now I'm drawing a blank, would Senator Murphy please stand for a question?
Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Murphy, as I look at this, I guess I question, we have a whole number of things that cities and townships square off on. Is there additional cost when they go to the Office of Dispute Resolution? Where do the funds come from to pay for those resolutions? And will this increase the cost of doing business? Is there any fiscal analysis done on this?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Howe. When we heard Senator Weber's proposal in the committee, he made the assertion that this maneuver of docking someone's LGA would be rare because disputes between municipalities are rare. I believe that by shifting the responsibility among communities in the way that this proposal does, that we could in fact undermine mutual aid and shift the relationship between communities in a way that could really escalate costs here in the state of Minnesota, where communities decide that they need to invest in their own bomb squads, hazmat units, et cetera, because the thread of mutual aid has been pulled apart by the proposal before us. The Office of Complaint and Dispute Resolution is set up for this purpose. It's already there. It's already funded. It's already used. And if Senator Weber is right, and that the complaint about bills being paid is rare, then I don't expect that there will be any additional fiscal cost for that office, because they're already there to resolve those differences, and as Senator Weber has argued, those differences will be rare.
Senator Howe.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for that answer, Senator Murphy. But my concerns is that having the experience of being a firefighter that has dealt with mutual aid over and over again, we ensured that we took care of those fellow communities because we wanted to ensure that they were going to respond again. We've heard from countless agencies that are concerned about responding because they're not going to get the funds. And I think this is an excellent way to ensure that those funds, those departments, those agencies are going to get compensated in a relatively short period of time without having to go through a long drawn-out process. So I think Senator Weber's idea is an excellent one. I stand opposed to the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next on the list, I have Senator Nelson, followed by Senator Weber.
Oh,
Senator
thank
Nelson.
you. Thank you, Mr. President. I so appreciate Senator Murphy's emphasis on better ways to do things. That's what we do here. We look for better ways to do things. And we have 67 senators that participate in that and represent their constituents from all over the state. And I also greatly appreciate Senator Dibble's comments about transparency and the voice of the minority. We need the voice of the minority. I've been in the voice of the minority. We have constituents who are represented by senators who are in the minority. We definitely need that voice. But my comments earlier, members, were not about, my comments were about what happened, or more readily, what did not happen. The place for real public debate and real stakeholder input, that stakeholder input, members, comes in committees. And my point was, we had 2 committee hearings on Senator Weber's bill. Now, as the chair of the tax committee, I can tell you there was not an amendment. And I do not, looking at the records, it doesn't look like there was an amendment in Senator Weber's committee either. And so, members, my point is, let's start off this 2021 session when we're still in remote, giving one another the benefit of the doubt, seeking to do our work in as public and transparent process as possible. Thank you.
Next on the list, I have Senator Weber, followed by Senator Benson. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to ensure, in case it had gotten lost in all the other discussion, that I was in opposition to the A12 amendment.
Senator Benson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And if Senator Murphy would prepare to answer questions.
Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Benson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as I look at the A12, I'm a little confused. It says that we've been told the Office of Dispute Resolutions can already do this. And so Senator Murphy would answer, is this a new responsibility for the Office of Dispute Resolution?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Senator Benson. Yes, this would be described as another option, but it is the work that the office is already doing. It is a replacement for the more punitive result that is embedded in the Senate file we're debating right now.
Senator Benson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And if Senator Murphy would continue to yield, if the office is already authorized to review these disputes, and as people have raised, cities have brought disputes there in the past, then I have some concerns. Do cities and municipalities not know about this office? Because it's my understanding that there are unpaid invoices from the mutual aid that was given this summer. And there have been public letters saying that there would be, if the city of Minneapolis continued to cut its police force, there would be limited mutual aid. Now, I will tell you, I do not believe our law enforcement is going to abandon the city of Minneapolis. But if a city has unpaid invoices and has concerns about responding to mutual aid, and this office already exists, Mr. President, Senator Murphy, if you would yield, why wouldn't those cities go to the Office of Dispute Resolution if that was really the easiest way to get their invoices paid and not have to write letters about not responding to future civil unrest?
Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Benson. As we listened to and asked questions last week about this piece of legislation, the thing that we heard over and over from communities, from municipalities, is we don't even charge a bill. When we go to aid another community, we don't follow up with a bill. When we heard this bill in the subcommittee, there was no testimony about unpaid bills. There was no letter of proof that there was an unpaid bill. It was just a claim. And as we're talking about it today, it continues to be just a claim. In counter to that, over and over again, from first responders, from the hazmat unit, from the bomb squad, from communities across the state, they say, we go where the trouble is, and we offer aid. In many cases, those agreements are already set, but even if they're not, we do. We don't send bills to one another. This is not a problem. This is a solution in search of a problem. And so I think if there were multiple efforts and examples and evidence where there had been unpaid bills, then yes, this office may have been employed for that purpose. But that's not the case. And the people of Minnesota continue to say, we're going to look out for each other, we're going to show up for each other, we're going to help each other. And this proposal, Senate File 749, seeks to distort that relationship by making it punitive after the fact. I think that's dangerous. I think that's trouble. Senator Bach called it tinkering with LGA. But I think it's more substantial than that. I think it undermines the very fabric that we count on in the state of Minnesota. So Senator Benson, the reason why is because there isn't a conflict. The reason why is we haven't seen any evidence of unpaid bills. And if there is a problem, the better way to solve it is to put people at a table with the mediators so they can solve it for themselves. We do not need to insert ourselves into this fight. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator Benson.
I'm looking at an invoice from Anoka County, so Senator Murphy's contention that there is no request for payment is without basis, based on the facts that I see in front of me. I also happen to know that Anoka County had a significant role in supporting the city of Minneapolis during the unrest, and they were happy to do so. But I do know that if the city of Minneapolis isn't going to be prepared to stand up in the future, it is going to be very difficult for other law enforcement to step into that gap. Senator Weber is trying to resolve a problem based on more recent behavior than any other we've seen. The Office of Dispute Resolution has been available. It hasn't been used in this circumstance. And there is deep concern by surrounding communities that Minneapolis' decision to step back from some of its policing responsibilities will have significant ramifications for communities. Senator Weber is trying to get in front of a problem so that surrounding communities will know that they can respond and that the burden they bear will be compensated.
Next on the list, we have Senator Frentz, followed by Senator Abler. Senator Frentz.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. We are on the A12 amendment, are we not, Mr. President? Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
We're on the A12 amendment to the amendment.
Thank you. Senator Benson, I hear deep concern by surrounding communities, and you could not be more right. The Minnesota cities and the Minnesota counties that we all represent have weighed in with their concern about Senate File 749, and what they've weighed in and said is far from supportive. A letter from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities says CGMC opposes in all circumstances the use of LGA as a penalty or tool to enforce the policy preferences of the legislature. These are surrounding communities. That letter begins by, on behalf of the coalition, I'm willing to express our opposition to Senate File 749, signed by Greg Zilka, the president of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. So we should ask, Mr. President, what do our surrounding communities think? I understand that the Association of Minnesota Counties has likewise registered its opposition. I have yet to hear which community in Minnesota supports Senate File 749, and I think as we weigh these amendments, we probably want to know the answer to that question. I can't resist pointing out that this statute comes from the St. Peter tornado, where countless area communities came in to help the cities of St. Peter and Comfrey deal with the devastating 1998 tornado. That tornado caused over $250 million worth of damage. It completely destroyed 200 homes in the community of St. Peter. In this community of Comfrey, in Senator Dames's district, all the 450 homes in Comfrey were damaged to some extent. What was the response of the surrounding communities, Mr. President? It was to come to the aid of those communities, and that's exactly what Minnesota stands for, and that's exactly why we should be voting no on Senate File 749. I'll be voting yes on the Murphy Amendment A12. Thank you, Mr. President.
We have Senator Abler, followed by Senator Dietzick. Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I came down initially just to point out that there was an unpaid bill. I talked to my sheriff this morning, and he said he didn't mind if I talked about Anoka. So actually, they sent 90 people for 10 days for 12-hour shifts, and that's about 60% of their force. And they haven't gotten a penny. This morning when I talked to him at 8-something, he is unaware of any money coming from Minneapolis at all. And so, since it's an amendment we're discussing, we're really discussing the topic. I think that I raised 6 boys, Mr. President, and the first thing I taught them to do was to pay their debts. And if somebody didn't pay a debt, that it would be foolish for that person to be trusted to pay a debt in the future as well. So there may well be some format that makes sense to get some money put aside in a fund, and actually I support that. But I think, you know, this is almost like step one in just responsible behavior. And you know, Senator Friends, nobody flooded those communities or whatever. I didn't hear your example, but somebody actually decided to go out and do mayhem in a conscious way. And Mr. President, getting upstream from this, it seems like everybody in this, nobody's saying, please don't riot. Rioting is a bad idea. Don't burn your neighborhoods down. Don't do it. And I think that'd be helpful. And I think that we need to be as inclusive as we can be in our discussions here with the public, so the concerns they have that would drive a person to that level of intensity can be freely heard in a place like this or somewhere else. And I think that's really the heart of this. And I don't know, frankly, Mr. President, why we're planning for riots. I just had to say that. I've been talking to around town quite a bit. And the assumption is there's going to be riots. And you know, we've been sitting through a time, it's about a 1-year anniversary of executive orders. And I think the better way, Mr. President, for this whole topic to be handled, more than the governor saying, give us $35 million, and we go like, well, we're troubled by that, to actually draw together and have a real dialogue and not dueling announcements. This place, Senator Murphy and to the rest, is a place of respectful decorum, thoughtful discussion, and ways to resolve big, big issues. Is it tragic about what would drive a person to want to go, you know, in the streets and express everything that they expressed? horrible. Is it just as horrible that somebody would burn down somebody's store? And that, you know, and that didn't help anybody. And so I think the real issue is that. And I have to tell you one thing else about the people I run into. Even being made necessary by the city decided they didn't really want a police department much. I have a blue-collar county, Mr. President, and there's not a lot of money there, and we can't afford a lot of new property taxes to pay for all the things that are going to happen. And so Anoka County cares about floods, it cares about tornadoes, it cares about riots, it cares about the welfare of the state. And so one guy last night said, we want our voice back to be a part of that discussion through me and through the rest of us. And so this is a good debate, but in the solution phase, I think we need to do all the things we do the best, which is to conduct thoughtful discussions. First things first, if you incurred a debt, pay your debt, and then let's see what we can do for the future and pray to God that there are no riots at all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next, we have Senator Dietzick, followed by Senator Rest. Senator Dietzick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Abler, I agree that communities should pay their debt. I agree that all of us should pay their debt, and we should pay our debt. When I get a bill, when I get my Visa bill, I look it over. I review it to make sure that there are there are charges that were either more than I expected or were not, they weren't mine. So, in this day of identity theft and everything, you should review the bills. So the city of Minneapolis, and I represent a portion of the city of Minneapolis, I've had numerous discussions with them about this continual rumor of multiple unpaid bills. And so the city has told me that the city of Ramsey sent a bill back in October, and the city paid it. Shortly thereafter, the city of Blaine sent a bill that had additional items on that bill that are not what is usually in mutual aid bills. They reviewed it, they did their due diligence, they called the city of Blaine with some questions, and they're still waiting for clarification. That's my understanding. I also believe the city of Anoka, the county of Anoka, city of Anoka, I'll be honest, I don't know which one, sent a bill about 2 weeks ago. The city of Minneapolis is reviewing it and has called and asked for some questions and clarification and discussion. And that is the diligent thing to do. That is their fiscal responsibility on both sides to have that discussion. And again, they're having that discussion to resolve their bills. And I think Senator Murphy's A12 amendment, again, if they can't resolve it, I think that is a better way. Rather than punitively go after LGA, which was not set up to go after and pay fines and penalties. I mean, are we going to then, the next bill going to be to require cities to pay certain fines and penalties with LGA? There are 108 cities that don't get LGA, so what about them? What if a community goes and helps another city that doesn't get LGA? Again, where is their backstop? I think the better bill, the city is working on paying their bills, the city is in those discussions, and I think if they cannot come to an agreement, I think the better solution is to go to this dispute resolution and work it out in a friendly manner that, again, brings everybody together and has an open, transparent discussion about what those mutual aid needs are going forward. Thank you.
Next, we have Senator Rest, followed by Senator Dibble. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to return to the core understanding that Senator Murphy began with of who we are as Minnesotans and how we respond to one another in times of trouble. It is not about incurring a debt. It is about following the principles that most of us in many religions assert of the Golden Rule, that we will help others as we expect them to help us, which does not mean sending us a bill. I, for one, have not inquired of my cities, I have 5, about whether they send bills for mutual aid. I expect better of them than that. If they think that somehow there was an undue burden, that they will try and reconcile that with the entity that they helped. I don't know. Senator Frentz mentioned St. Peter. I don't know how many communities sent St. Peter a bill thinking that they were asking St. Peter to incur a debt for helping one another. That's not the way we act as Minnesotans. That's why we have mutual aid. That's why most cities, unless they are pressed because of their own exigencies in their budgeting, they don't even bring it up. We reach out to one another, we depend on one another, and as for responsible behavior, responsible behavior says when you are in trouble, you ask for help, Mr. President. You ask for help. And the responsible answer is, indeed, here we are, and we're here to help. Please vote for the A12 amendment.
Next on the list, we have Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, once again I rise in response to one of my colleagues whose comments were quite telling. And so we're getting down to the crux of why we're really here today. Seems like we're not no longer interested in helping one another, but fanning the flames of perception and misperception. Mr. President, absolutely, people shouldn't, it's regrettable and terrible when riots occur and people's lives and livelihoods are disrupted or destroyed. We absolutely agree. I would suggest, though, that simple bromides and platitudes of "don't riot" aren't helpful. What happened last year didn't happen in a vacuum, it happened in a historical context. And it also happened at the hands of numerous individuals who came to Minneapolis, people with a political agenda, provocateurs and saboteurs, people coming from the far right and the extreme far right who came and antagonized, Mr. President, started those fires, broke those windows, created the agitation that caused so much of the havoc that we witnessed. So, members, when you're admonishing the people of Minneapolis not to riot, members, keep your residents at home and keep them out of Minneapolis so they don't do those sorts of things and destroy my neighbors' businesses and communities and property. People from Ames, Andover, Big Lake, Blaine, Bloomington, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, all the way from Chicago, Columbia Heights, Coon Rapids, Crookston, Davenport, Duluth, Eagan, Cottage Grove, Eden Prairie, Elk River, Elmira, Fargo, Fergus Falls, Fridley, Galesville, Grand Forks, Ham Lake, Hancock, Inver Grove Heights, Jordan, La Crosse, Little Canada, Matamidi, Mankato, Maplewood, Matson, McKinnon, Miramar, Montrose, Moose Lake, Mound, Oakdale, Plainfield, Plymouth, Ramsey, Mr. President, Ramsey, Robbinsdale, Rochester, Roseville, St. Paul, Shakopee, Shoreview, Sutton, Vadnais Heights, Wabasha, Wayzata, West St. Paul, White Bear Lake, Wichita, and Woodbury. Mr. President, those are the people who were arrested for so much of the mayhem that occurred in my city. Thank you, Mr. President.
Next on the list, I have Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. President. A technical question, if Senator Murphy would yield. I would offer, though, initially, though, I do agree with Senator Rest's comments about mutual aid ought to be mutual aid. And mutual aid is usually structured around some sort of an agreement, at least it is where I live, with area law enforcement or area fire departments. And that agreement deals with command structure, liability, and things like that. I'm led to believe that in the Twin Cities area, though, that those structures, those agreements rather, tend to get into financial reimbursement and so on and so forth. I may be wrong, but Senator Friends, I know our Rochester Public Utilities was in St. Peter for probably about a week. They travel as far as Florida to help during hurricanes and so on. Their, if you will, brothers in other places, not only in the state of Minnesota, but around the country. But Senator Murphy, my question is this: if you go to the 810 amendment, the 812 amendment, it talks about that amendment and this initiative not covering anything before January 1st of 2021. So nothing before 2021, as I recall. But then you look at the 812, or pardon me, the 810, the underlying amendment, and it talks about costs payable in 2022. So that is my question. What about those costs incurred, in fact, that originate in 2021, which is the likely year of these costs? And then this bill becomes effective for 2022. What about, and thereafter, what about those costs in 2021? Is this technically accurately written? That's my question.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Senjum. Yes, technically accurately written by our able Senate counsel. The underlying amendment, of course, is fixing a technical problem with errors that were made in the certification of LGA. The A12 amendment is speaking specifically to the resolution of issues that have emerged in the wake of the disaster that happened in the Twin Cities area and the surrounding counties in the last year.
So, Mr. President and Senator Murphy, if I can just, maybe you can just give me an affirmation. So it would be expected, given your bill, that in charges, or at least expenses by assisting departments in 2021 likely would not be paid until 2022. Is that the essence of what you just said and what the bill says?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Senator Senjum. That is what is proposed in the Weber bill.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Senator Murphy.
All right, members, we're on the A12 amendment to the amendment. Roll call has been requested. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, please come to the chamber to vote. Retiring room. Members in room 303, please come to the chamber to vote. And members in the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 202, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 237, please come to the chamber to vote. And members in room 323, please come to the chamber to vote. I will call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes aye.
Clausen votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes aye.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes aye.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes aye.
Klein votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Marty votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
McEwen votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Pappas votes aye.
Pappas votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Wickland votes aye.
Wickland votes aye.
Thank you.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes no.
Coleman votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes no.
Anderson votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes no.
Lang votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Eichhorn votes no.
Eichhorn votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmick votes no.
Osmick votes no. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 33 ayes and 34 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And members, just so we're clear, we are on, that was an amendment to the amendment, so we are now on the A10 amendment, the underlying amendment. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under Rule 35 that speaks about germaneness, I'd like to challenge the germaneness of A10 amendment. Its intent to accomplish a substantially different purpose is other than what the bill that was proposed is. What we have here is a delete everything amendment in the A10 that does not speak to the mutual aid agreement, nor is a reference. So I think that accomplishes a substantially different intent than what Senator Weber had initially intended.
Members, Senator Johnson is raising a point of order under Rule 35, germaneness 35.2. Senator Johnson, can you please repeat number 1 or number 2 under 35.2?
Mr. President, number 2.
Okay. Advice to the President?
Mr. President.
Senator Ress.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask the members and you, sir, to look at line 1.3 of the A10 amendment, which specifically references section 477A, which is also referenced quite clearly and indisputably in the underlying bill. This is that it seeks to replace. It is a correction with regard to LGA that needs to be made by the Commissioner of Revenue, and it certainly is germane as a underlying in its underpinnings, rather, to replace the Senator Weber's 749. So I would ask you to vote and to rule that the point of order is not well taken.
Further advice? Members, I rule that the point of order is well taken and the amendment, the A10 amendment, is not germane.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I challenge the ruling of the chair and ask for a roll call.
Senator Rest is challenging the ruling of the president. The question before the body is, shall the decision of the president be the judgment of the Senate? A green vote is in favor of the judgment of the president, and a red vote is against the judgment of the president. A roll call has been requested. A roll call will be granted. The secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, please come to the chamber to vote. And members in room 303 and the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 323, please come to the chamber to vote, as well as members in room 237 and room 206. Please come to the chamber to vote. I'll call on Senator Jasinski to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Anderson votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Eichhorn votes aye.
Eichhorn votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Osmic votes aye.
Osmic votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes no.
Clausen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes no.
Klein votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes no.
Latz votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes no.
Marty votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator McEwen votes no.
McEwen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes no.
Newton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Pappas votes no.
Pappas votes no.
And Senator
Frentz.
Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 36 ayes and 31 nays, the position of the President is sustained. Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A13 amendment.
Senator Dietzig offers the A13 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Dietzig moves to amend Senate File Number 749 as follows, page 1 after line 5, insert. This is the A13 amendment.
To the amendment, Senator Dietzig.
Mr. President, I also have the A16 amendment.
Senator Dietzig, is this an amendment to the amendment?
Yes, it is.
Senator Dietzig offers the A16 amendment to the amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment to the amendment.
Senator Dietzig moves to amend the Dietzig amendment to Senate File Number 749 as follows, page 1 after line 2, insert. This is the A16 amendment.
To the amendment to the amendment, Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Senator Weber's bill uses LGA to and tells cities that they must use that LGA to pay for certain costs. And LGA is local government aid, and it helps communities all across our state meet their needs. It's a complicated and negotiated formula, and it's based on several factors, including population, the size of the city, the housing stock of the city, the number of employees in the city, and you should also have received members. If we were all here in person, I would tell you that you received letters on your desk. But since we're not here in person, you should receive the letters in the email from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, from the Association of Minnesota Counties, and from the League of Minnesota Cities. And in the Greater Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities bill, or letter, it talks about LGA has been a firm foundation upon which communities across the state have been built and thrived. It really helps communities large and small with their operating dollars. CPA is county program aid, and it also is a complicated formula. The formula is based on county need aid and county tax-based equalization aid. When you put these all together, they help our cities' budgets, just like our families' budgets, run the day-to-day functions of our communities. As we know, our family budgets, our business budgets, and our cities have been truly impacted by COVID. The CARES Act dollars that we sent down to communities, that the Fed sent to us and we sent to communities earlier this year, didn't address lost revenue. This amendment puts monies back on the formula to help those communities dealing with the revenue loss that they received. It holds several communities that get LGA harmless, and it provides a small inflationary adjustment for CPA. This bill is important to help with the day-to-day operation of our communities across the state, and I ask for your support, and I ask for a roll call vote.
Roll call has been requested. A roll call granted. Discussion on the A16 amendment to the amendment. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I must stand in opposition to this amendment. As I stated earlier, my bill makes no adjustments to the local government aid formula at all. The local government aid formula has always been a very complicated system, and I think there may be merits in discussion going forward about changes to that formula, but those must be made, I think, in a much more deliberate fashion than what we can do with an amendment on the floor. And at this point in time, I will stand in opposition to this amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment to the amendment. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I'd like to come back to Rule 35 and talk a little bit about what 35.2 on the second paragraph talks about. This amendment, again...
Is Senator Johnson raising a point of order? He should say so.
Mr. President, point of order.
Johnson. Please state your point of order, Senator Johnson.
Back to 35.2, paragraph 2. This amendment, the A16 amendment, which is the amendment to the A13 amendment, again is intended to accomplish a substantially different purpose than the underlying amendment and to the underlying bill. Mr. President, I challenge the germaneness of this amendment.
Senator Johnson raises a point of order on germaneness, 35.2. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't imagine an amendment that is more germane, that is more appropriate in a bill that proposes to use LGA, as Senator Murphy has pointed out earlier, to garnish the resources of another city. And in this case, counties as well. The notion that this would not be germane seems to me to just fly in the face of logic, as well as Senate rules. We understand that some do wish to garnish the resources of other communities, but most do not. And this is a way that we can, by providing additional LGA going forward for pay 2022, it's a way in which we recognize the services and the challenges of all of our cities, all of our local governments in meeting their needs of themselves and others in times of great need. And in that regard, this is certainly a germane amendment, and we will not forget.
Senator Dietzick and then Senator Nelson. Further advice, Senator Dietzick.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator Weber's bill makes adjustments to local assistance amount, to local government aid adjustments, and it could also make adjustments to county program aid. And the A16 amendment, which I don't think I got a copy, so if somebody could bring me a copy, that would be helpful. But that bill makes adjustments to local government aid and CPA. So both bills make adjustments to local aid. So I agree with Senator Rest. I don't know how more germane they could be. Thank you.
Senator Nelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I rise to further support the point of germaneness. I stand here thinking, yes, our LGA formula needs to be revisited. It doesn't serve the purpose that it did over a decade ago, and we have changed much since then. But these are very complicated issues that deserve runs, they deserve public debate, each one of us needing to look and see how our cities are affected. This is not the place nor the time for the LGA formula or CPA formula adjustments. I'm working with Chair Joachim over in the House on a thoughtful look at LGA restructuring to more adequately reflect the needs of the day. But members, let's just set that important piece aside. Senator Dietzig's amendment to the amendment has a price tag, members. It's $202 million. I do not recall us passing amendments without the ability to pay for them. So, Mr. President, I also believe this amendment is out of order.
Mr. President?
Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, we are certainly ready and prepared to debate the substance of the amendment, which Senator Nelson has just started to do. But that is not the point here. This is not a budget bill. This is not an omnibus bill. This is meeting the needs of Minnesota cities going forward. It is not a change in the formula. It is simply additional aid and holding some cities harmless. But that is not the issue. That is not the issue, and we should not be debating the substance of the amendment. We should be giving advice to the President on whether the point of order is well taken under the rules of germaneness. And once again, even in the people who are objecting to the amendment on germaneness are arguing that very point that it is indeed germane. It is about LGA. The amendment is about LGA. The bill is about LGA. This is a germane amendment, and the President should rule that the point of order is not well taken.
All right, members. Senator Frantz, further advice?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Rest addressed the substance I was hoping to raise, which is I believe we're discussing advice on a germaneness amendment. This is an LGA amendment to an LGA bill, and I believe the President should find that it is germane and therefore rule the point of order not well taken. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, I rule that the point of order is well taken and the amendment is not germane.
Mr. President, I challenge the ruling of the chair and I ask for a roll call.
Members, Senator Rest is appealing the ruling of the President. The question before the body is, shall the decision of the President be the judgment of the Senate? A green vote is in favor of the judgment of the President, and a red vote is against the judgment of the President. A roll call has been requested. The Secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in room 303, please come to the chamber to vote. And members in the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Members in rooms 323, 237, and 206, please come to the chamber to vote. Rooms 323, 237, and 206. I will call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes no.
Clausen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes no.
Klein votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes no.
Latz votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes no.
Marty votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator McEwen votes no.
McEwen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes no.
Newton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Pappas votes no.
Pappas votes no. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes yes.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Anderson votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Eichhorn votes aye.
Eichhorn votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmick votes aye.
Osmick votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Rosen votes aye.
Rosen votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 36 ayes and 31 nays, the decision of the President is sustained. Further discussion on the underlying amendment, Senator Dietzig.
Mr. President, I rise to a point of order.
For what reason do you rise?
Point of order on the A13 amendment.
Okay, please state your point of order.
Mr. President, under Mason's 402.1, every amendment proposed must be germane to the subject of the proposition or to the section of the paragraph being amended. Mr. President, you had previously ruled on the language of the A13 in the A10 as not being germane.
Senator Benson, what section, please?
Mr. President, I apologize. Section 402, paragraph 1, every proposed amendment must be germane to the subject of the preposition or the action or the section of paragraph to be amended. Mr. President, you ruled in the A10 that the language in the A13 was not germane.
Mr. President?
Senator Rest.
Mr. President, we could get through this a whole lot quicker if you would call on Senator Dietzig to withdraw the amendment.
Senator Dietzig.
Mr. President, I made the point of order because I do not want this to be a habit where something that's been ruled non-germane is presented as an amendment again.
And Senator Benson, we actually have a Senate rule that's even a higher precedence than Mason's that would be more accurate in this case, but let's give Senator Dietzig the opportunity to take the floor for a moment, and if you're not satisfied with that, then we can go to the Senate rule. Senator Dietzig.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand to withdraw the A13 amendment.
Senator Dietzig withdraws the A13 amendment. Members, we are back on Senate File 749.
Mr. President?
Senator Benson.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Senator Benson.
In the future, when an amendment that is offered is apparently non-germane, and then an amendment to that amendment is offered, and debate shifts away from the non-germane amendment, how would you like us to handle this?
So in the future, members, we can only debate and rule on what's in front of us. So at the time the amendment was in front of us, Senator Dietzig, I believe, was going to withdraw that amendment. You raised your point of order. In the future, I would give Senator Dietzig the opportunity, who had the floor, to take action on what she was going to do. And if you're not satisfied, if she's going to continue to debate that amendment, then we can raise a point of order and move forward at that point.
Mr. President, I would be happy to take this discussion offline, but the A13 was offered. I quickly reviewed the language, realized that it was the A10 amendment being reoffered, but before I could raise a point of order, it was amended, and therefore that language was not before the body. And so I think, given the experience that we've had today, I would like a parliamentary ruling. Doesn't have to be today, but at some point I would like to understand what action I can take to keep a non-germane amendment from being amended.
Mr. President?
Senator Rest.
I would just suggest that we have a matter before us. It's been dealt with. And if you don't make preliminary rulings on things that are hypothetical, well, that being said, it seems to me we're all ready to move forward.
Thank you, Senator Rest and Senator Benson. Senator Rest and members, there are rules in place in the Senate rules as well as in Mason's. I will highlight some of those for members. In this case, if the amendment was identical or very identical, I couldn't look it up in Mason's as we're on the spot right now, but there are procedures in place to prevent that from happening, so I will get that information out to the members. In the meantime, we're on Senate File 749. Any further discussion on Senate File 749? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. During the discussion today, we heard some statistics that I've heard often on the floor of the Senate regarding those that were arrested during the rioting in Minneapolis last year. And I just need to add to the public record that there were some statistics that were omitted. During the dates of May 25th through June 2nd of last year, facts and figures coming out of the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office regarding the arrests in Minneapolis showed a different picture of who actually was arrested during that time of violence, burning, and rioting. During that time period, 118 individuals were arrested in Hennepin County. 43% of those arrested were residents of Minneapolis. 49% came from greater Minnesota, 42% actually, and 18 came from out of state, from a variety of states. We seem to don't include the numbers of people from the city of Minneapolis that were participants in enough activities that caused their arrest during that time of rioting, burning, and other riotous affairs. Just thought I'd add that to the public record, Mr. President, because there's been a number of facts and figures that have been scattered about in this discussion, and I just wanted to bring a little reality and hard, cold numbers to the events that occurred during the riot. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, we're on Senate File 749. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File number 749, a bill for an act relating to local government aid.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Torres-Ray.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. It is very hard for me to really get up today and try to provide some remarks, especially when the opportunity that is in front of me is a bill that really does not help me resolve some of the issues and the problems that my district is facing. And furthermore, it creates a problem that many other cities now fear will create a problem for them. So I read the letters that came from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, the League of Minnesota Cities, the Association of Counties, imploring us not to do this. Not to do this, Senator Weber. That's what they are telling us. Please don't do that. So I wonder what kind of legislation is this? And in the floor, our rules really said that, we shouldn't judge and just, speak about something that we believe is the intention. But these organizations are asking what is the point of this legislation. And my constituents, members, are asking exactly the same question. What is the point of the work that the Senate majority is doing? And I don't have an answer for them. And Senator Weber, what I would like to tell you is that I have a lot of business owners that are asking for help right now. So I have the owners of a grocery store, very small grocery store. They have worked so hard to save money. Their grandchildren are now working in this store because they cannot afford to keep the employees. And their grandchildren are helping Elvira and Humberto deal with the businesses. They have not recovered. And they have asked, can you please help us resolve some of these problems in the city and provide some economic subsidies so that we can move ahead? Minnehaha Lake, Mr. Steve Krause and his son have worked so hard. Many of you visited that corner in my district. 43 years of work. They have not been able to rebuild their store. They need help. A distillery owned by the first African-American person who owns a distillery in the Midwest, Mr. Chris Montana, is asking, could you please help us,
Mr. President,
so that we can rebuild this business?
Senator Rosen, for what reason do you rise?
Point of order, please.
Please state your point of order, Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could you please give us a reminder that all remarks should be made to the President?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Rosen.
Just a reminder,
Thank you.
members, please address your comments to and through the President. Senator Torres, please continue.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Thank you, Mr. President. I have a restaurant owner from Gandhi Mahal who has invited many of you members to come and have dinner in his restaurant before, who escaped war in his own native country, has owned a business for 10 years, has not been able to rebuild. He doesn't have the money to do it. And my question, Mr. President and Senator Weber, is how this bill actually helped me answer those questions. What can I tell my constituents about your bill that actually answers to this painful situation that they face right now? I have to tell you what I am thinking. I don't know what my constituents are thinking right now about this bill. I know that after we pass this bill, they will be asking me this question. But what I have been thinking about, Mr. President and members, is about the times when people who represented the Twin Cities for many, many years became senior senators, and they chaired the Tax Committee, the Finance Committee, Dick Cohen, Larry Pogemiller for so many years. And criticisms were made that they actually favor policy, especially in education, for the Twin Cities to address disparities. But I remember that during the last 20 years that I have been watching these actions, they always try to bring us together and say, okay, we have some problems with sparsity in education in rural Minnesota. How can we solve our disparities in education in urban core and resolve sparsity problems in rural Minnesota? There was always this transaction that occurs here that I have criticized for many, many times, because I do believe in transformational policy. But transactions take place here. And we have always come together to say, okay, we can do something for greater Minnesota, but we also need to do something for urban Minnesota, for suburban Minnesota. Let's sit down and figure this out. Members, for as long as I have been in the minority, I have not felt that. We have gone in the opposite direction. During the last 3 years, I have just faced this incredible, pain here, trying to even call sometimes members of the majority who do not return the calls to have a hearing on bills that are authored by the minority. But this really, really went far when my own district and my own city faced some tremendous difficulties last year, and many businesses were burned down. To this day, and I have said this before, Mr. President, the only person in the minority who's ever called me to say, what can I do? It was you, Senator Miller. Have not been able to even get in touch with Senator Rosen. Have not been able to make an appointment with Senator Gazalka. What kind of a place is this? What kind of work are we trying to do now? How do we speak to our constituents about their families, their future? I do not know. I have to confess, Mr. President, Senator Weber, and members, that I am angry today, and I'm thinking, I hope I become a chair so that I can put a bill about LGA and really keep my money, because my city is the economic engine of this state. It just so happened that I have a growing population in my district. People want to come and live in Minneapolis. We have a tax base that supports rural Minnesota because your communities are declining. You do not have a tax base as big as mine. You do not have the population that is required for the population and the works and the jobs of the future. I do. I am committed to work for the entire state of Minnesota. The Twin Cities are the economic engine of the state of Minnesota. Our taxes pay for your roads, for your police officers, many things that you do not have the tax base to pay for. I hope you remember that my city is in need today. I hope you remember that these people that I mentioned and many, many others are suffering, and all we're asking is to please take a look at our suffering and act as policymakers who care. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. And Mr. Weber, Senator Weber, I just would like to ask the question again about what are you trying to solve with this bill. I just want to hear it. I just want to tell my constituent not what your intention is, but practically what this bill resolves. And also, have you read the letters from the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, from the League of Minnesota Cities? Could you please tell me if you agree or disagree with their request and their assessment and what they are telling you in these letters? Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Members, I have a lengthy list here. Next on the list, I have Senator Eakin, followed by Senator Bigham. Senator Eakin.
Right there. Thank you, Mr. President, members. And I think it's important that we look at the larger perspective of this bill. This isn't about one particular incident or one particular city. This is setting a precedent for events yet to come, for cities that have not yet experienced disasters. And I'm very concerned about that it is setting a dangerous precedent. I represent a community up in the Red River Valley which experiences flooding quite often, devastating floods that have devastated our area, and we've needed help at times when that has happened. And local government aid, I don't think that is the vehicle through which we should be addressing this particular issue, because it is so critically important to those communities in our area. And it seems to me like it's kicking people when they're down. If you have a community that's experiencing a major flood, and then on top of the flood and the major damage that's been done and the cleanup work that's being done, now they're hit with cuts to their local government aid or their county program aid as well. The Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities says in their written opposition to this bill, stated that to use local government aid as a penalty erodes the very purpose of local government aid. Its purpose is to address property tax inequities and to ensure that all communities, regardless of where they're located, receive good quality basic services. And this bill would weaken the LGA program that is so critical to the success of our rural communities. We need to be strengthening rural communities, especially now with the struggles they've been going through, especially with the pandemic. And this requires that we defend local government aid. I've been especially concerned about local government aid now given the fact that we're in a budget session and facing a deficit. I recall back in the early 2000s when I first came into the legislature and the House, the significant cuts that were being made to local government aid and county program aid in order to balance the budget. It was devastating for our communities because it led to increasing property taxes, and it led to cuts to vital rural services. It really amounted to a pay more, get less strategy, again, that was devastating for our communities that were already struggling. We're still trying to recover from those cuts. And now, as I say, we're facing a pandemic as well. So we are facing a crisis in our rural communities as well. And I mentioned the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. I think it's important to note that there's all kinds of organizations representing rural voices and rural concerns that have spoken up to voice their concerns about this bill. The League of Minnesota Cities had said that for small cities across the state, losing a sizable portion of their LGA could affect the city and county credit rating, and in a worst-case scenario could result in a default on outstanding bonds. Again, at a time when they would be struggling because they'd be facing disaster themselves. So I see any attempts to weaken local government aid or county program aid as an attack really on our rural communities that depend so much on these programs for critical services. This bill would weaken local government aid and county program aid, which really is the lifeblood of many of our rural communities. So think about the larger picture here. Think about the negative consequences this is going to have to people throughout the state. That's what this is really about. So I urge members to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Senator Bigham, followed by Senator Thomason. Senator Bigham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I obviously rise in opposition to Senate File 749. I think the organizations that have been persistent, that have been mentioned, have done a good job outlining why this is a bad bill. I mean, Mr. President, don't threaten me with a good time talking about local government aid and county program aid. I mean, this is such an important topic, not only for the legislature, but specifically to me as somebody who has had to deal with it being implemented, has had to deal with it being taken away midstream. And I've been around long enough to know that when you can get the League of Minnesota Cities, Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, and the Association of Minnesota Counties to agree on something and be unified, that is huge. And that, Mr. President, is exactly what this body should be doing today. But Senate File 749 doesn't do that. Sorry, Mr. President. This is a disappointing, divisive, and dangerous bill. This is an all-out attack on local government aid and county program aid, which I will remind are direct property tax relief to Minnesotans. Cities and counties do their budget, start their budget cycle in January. It's not like how we do ours here. And the communities who receive local government aid, Mr. President, they will have their budgets disrupted if their local government aid could be garnished by a neighboring community at any point. This is so disruptive to local governments who we have depended on and applauded their assistance during this pandemic. But we also do that during fires, storms, floods, for a community during their time of need. And we are causing them anxiety and further disruption. And that is wrong. That is not bringing people together. That is not being a good partner to our local partners. There's nothing in this bill that deals with cities who do not receive LGA. This bill, again, is disruptive, divisive, and punitive in nature. In my district, in the city of St. Paul Park, they have a mutual aid agreement with the oil refinery in St. Paul Park. Additionally, there are mutual aid agreements with the cities of Newport and St. Paul Park. And now for context, St. Paul Park and Newport receive LGA. Cottage Grove got a little, but it's not certified for 2021. They did grow, so there's a lot to do with it. But numerous and countless times, Newport and Cottage Grove have shown up to help St. Paul Park with incidents at that refinery that has hazardous materials that are highly volatile and uses hydrofluoric acid. They show up because that is what they do. They support each other. They help each other out. That is the very spirit of our brave and honorable first responders, and this proposal goes against that very spirit. This proposal would be a disincentive to enter into mutual aid agreements in the future, possibly leaving communities even more vulnerable. Now, I'm not going to get in the weeds here today, but cities have an insurance trust through the league. And I believe the cost to those smaller communities to be in that trust will increase due to the high possibility that there will be fewer mutual aid agreements covering those smaller, predominantly rural communities. Cities and counties depend on local government aid and county program aid to provide general government assistance. And you disrupt their budget with this dangerous, disruptive, and punitive proposal. Please, members, small communities, rural communities will be greatly impacted by this bill. Let's stop with the divisiveness. Let's bring people together. Let's lift each other up in their time of need. And let's remember the very spirit of helping your neighbor. Please vote no on Senate File 749.
Next, we have Senator Thomasoni, followed by Senator Fateh. Senator Thomasoni.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I agree with much of what Senator Eakin had to say, and because I know how important local government aid is to all of our communities, especially out in rural Minnesota where the small communities can have a very hard time raising enough money in order for them to make their governments work right. So I just have a few questions that I would like to ask Senator Weber. So, Mr. President, will Senator Weber yield to a couple of questions? And do I have to ask him to yield every time I ask a question, or can I just keep asking questions?
Technically, you're supposed to, Senator Thomasoni, you should know that of all people. Senator Thomasoni, yes, you have to ask him to yield each
I'm trying to change the rules.
Senator Weber will yield. Senator Thomasoni.
Senator Weber, in the event of a mutual aid agreement and a community provides mutual aid to another community, thus triggering a bill for mutual aid from one community to the other, where would that community that receives the mutual aid, what fund in the city or community would they pay the mutual aid bill from?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, I would expect that, as I recall my local government experience, money from that came from the fund in which it was dedicated to. So if we are looking at police mutual aid or what have you, that it would be provided for within their police fund.
And Mr. President.
Senator Thomasoni.
And does that money come from the community's general fund to be sent to the specific fund that is paying for the mutual aid?
Senator Weber will continue to yield. Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, yes, monies from the general fund typically provide for those basic services such as police and fire protection.
And if Senator Weber will continue to yield.
He will continue to yield.
Senator Weber, and what fund is LGA deposited in when a community receives their LGA payment?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, it is generally deposited in the general fund.
Okay. And
Senator Thomasoni.
Senator Weber will continue to yield.
He will. Senator Thomasoni.
So, Senator Weber, this bill would only go into the effect in the event that mutual aid was not paid, if I understand it correctly. And what is the effective date of this bill, when it would actually go into effect?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, you're correct. This deals only with future incidents, and basically what we're looking at is, if, for example, if there was a scenario in 2021 which generated the need for mutual aid and there is not payment made in a timely fashion, one would expect that effectively it would not take effect until to go through the certification process, that then the Commissioner of Revenue would withhold it from the next payment that would be due. We would generally expect possibly the first half payment in 2022.
Senator Thomasoni.
Senator Weber, continue to yield.
You will, Senator Thomasoni.
So 2022 is the date of when it would go into effect. How long does the mutual aid payment have to be in arrears before the bill actually kicks in?
Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Thomasoni, basically, you have to remember that if there's a mutual aid agreement, the terms of the agreement will always prevail. So if there was an ordinarily long period of time that a city had to pay the bill, that quite frankly, our Senate File 749 would not kick in until those time periods had been exhausted.
Senator Thomasoni.
And Senator Weber, does this bill make any changes to state support for costs incurred by the State Patrol or the National Guard?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, no, it does not. It's fully the expectation that whatever costs the state incurs with the National Guard or the State Highway Patrol, we will continue to fund.
Senator Thomasoni.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weber, and if I understand this bill correctly, it does not make any changes to local government aid formula. It's simply a payment mechanism to make sure that reimbursements are paid. So in the event that this bill actually does kick in, does it have an effect on all the cities that receive LGA or just the one that owes the payment?
Senator Weber.
Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, you are correct. There is no change in local government aid. All communities will receive the local government aid that they are to receive based on the formula. The only time this would happen is if a community who owed mutual aid payment failed to make it, that their LGA could be reduced by the amount of the certified shortfall that they have to another community.
And Mr.
Senator
President,
Thomasoni.
Senator Weber, so the answer to the question is that the other cities that receive mutual aid, or excuse me, that receive LGA would not have their LGA affected in any way, shape, or form.
Senator Weber. Mr. President, Senator Thomasoni, that is correct.
Okay, Mr.
Senator
President,
Thomasoni.
I think I'm done with questions for Senator Weber. I just believe that, first of all, the local government aid that we have in place is extremely, extremely important, and I'm content that all communities won't be affected by this bill, only the community that needs to make a payment. And I'm also content by the fact that the community that would make the payment would make it out of their general fund, and that local government aid goes into their general fund, so it's part of the money that they have anyway. And somewhere along the way they have to make a payment. This just guarantees that the payment's made. But I also believe that mutual aid is very important, and I believe that a community that's providing mutual aid want to know that they'll be reimbursed. And I also think that knowing that there's a mechanism in place to reimburse mutual aid costs will result in mutual aid being given without reservation. And I think that's what this bill is trying to accomplish, Mr. Chair.
All right, members. Still a lengthy list here. Next we have Senator Fateh, who's going to be followed by Senator Westrom. Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, the day after I won my election, I got hundreds of phone calls, as you might expect. Many from supporters and friends, but also many from people who work in and around this Senate. Mostly folks called to congratulate, but many of you who called me had a different message. You told me that the Senate is a deliberative body. It is slow and it is methodical. And the culture of the Senate is one of civil engagement. You might sharply disagree with some of your colleagues, but you must show them respect and not pick personal fights. We owe that to the people that elected us. So today, Mr. President, I'm sorry to say I'm not feeling respected. The legislation on the floor is targeted, disrespectful, hateful, and dangerous. So, Mr. President, by bringing forward this legislation and voting for it, my colleagues on the other side are picking a political fight with no other outcome other than to score points with their base, embarrass the governor, and demonize our people, those who live in the Twin Cities.
Mr. President.
Senator Chamberlain, for what reason do you rise?
I just would like to remind the body that you cannot, if I'm correct, imply intent. The good senator from Minneapolis, I think, is crossing or near crossing line of implying intent upon the members of this body. It's not appropriate. Implying motive.
Thank you, Senator Chamberlain, for the reminder. Senator Fateh, please continue with that in mind.
Mr. President.
Senator Dibble, for what reason do you rise?
As one who is often accused of the same falsely in this body, I would say that Senator Fateh was not impugning or implying intent. He was characterizing the outcome of this legislation, which he should be free to do, free from being interrupted and free from having his comments mischaracterized. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, let Senator Fateh please keep your comments to the bill in front of us. Masons is very clear. You're not to impugn any motives of any other member. So, Senator Fateh, to Senate File 749.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to both of the senators. So I'm here to let everyone know that by doing this, we're not sticking it to the governor, we're not sticking it to the mayors in the Twin Cities or the city councils. It's the people that we're hurting. So in a time in which we were devastated by two crises, COVID-19, as well as the murder of George Floyd, you are kicking people while they're down, rather than proposing meaningful action. So I wish right now that we were acting like a deliberative body. I wish I was on the floor today to debate the best path forward for public safety in our districts and in our state. But that's not what we're here to do today, because everyone in this building knows that this proposal to withhold LGA will never, ever be signed into law. What we are doing here today is purely partisan politics, which will result in no meaningful outcome to benefit the people whose lives have been upended by the crises of police brutality and COVID-19, especially our black and brown residents, people that look like me. So we are wasting time because there is much more important issues to debate, like what is the best path forward for the public safety of Minnesota. And in discussions related to this bill, like the one being debated in the House right now, even Republican Representative Garofalo stated that this LGA proposal was acting recklessly. In my view, it is not just reckless, it is punitive and anti-human. So as the senator for South Minneapolis, myself and my colleagues in the Posse Caucus, as well as my colleagues in the Minneapolis delegation, we are all left wondering, are we here to come up with a plan to best uphold peace, safety, and the well-being of our residents, or are we doing a highly political dance? So, Mr. President, while we are debating the most appropriate way to ensure funding for law enforcement, we are ignoring the facts of what happened last year. It is as if we have amnesia. The pretense of this legislation is that Minneapolis is irresponsibly diverting funds from its police department, the force is short-staffed, and we need to force Minneapolis to take its obligations towards public safety more serious. But there's a major problem with that story, Mr. President. The problem with these dynamics that we are seeing is that one being Minneapolis police officers leaving the force, and the other being activists and policymakers discussing a new vision for public safety that doesn't solely rely on police. These are a result of a broken system of public safety, of years of brutality disproportionately targeting black and brown people. They are the result of the murder of George Floyd and the unrest that followed. It is not the cause. So George Floyd was murdered in the district that I represent. And in the days that followed, much of the civil unrest that we're talking about here today took place in my community. As expected, community members took to the streets to protest the atrocious murder by 4 MPD officers. But our protests were peaceful and yet met with nothing but pure disrespect and escalation by police officers. Yes, the protesters were angry at the police, but the police were also angry at the protesters. The police took our calls for systemic change, for a system that works for all of us and provides justice for all of us, as a personal attack rather than a genuine outcry for meaningful change that's permanent. So this conflict, this clash of values, led to the escalation of the unrest into riots which started as an organic movement centered at the 3rd Precinct, but eventually spread through to citywide destruction of our small businesses, and the maiming of dozens of protesters, many of who were shot in the face by rubber bullets and are now receiving settlements because they did nothing to deserve that level of brutality. We also know, as stated today by many of us on both sides, that not everyone involved in the riots were there in good faith. We know that there were outsiders who came into our city looking for violent political fights, and others who came for no reason other than to have a little fun in a city during a vulnerable time. And I'll give you a little story about that. During one afternoon while the peace was lost in our city, a number of my friends and comrades posted up at our campaign office to provide food, water, and medical supplies, an escape route to people caught in the conflict. On that afternoon, we gave a few water bottles to a barefoot white man in a black van with unmarked plates. Later, we learned that that same man opened fire at the Pimento Kitchen at a group of largely black and brown people who were out and about not to cause destruction, but to provide mutual aid. And we saw other instances of opportunists coming in to loot and destroy. We know the American Indian movement stopped a group of Wisconsin teenagers from breaking into a liquor store in the Little Earth area. And after much deliberation, the AIM activists determined what they lightheartedly joked was a cruel punishment fit for a heinous crime. They called the boys mothers. So what these stories and countless other stories illustrate is that the people of Minneapolis are the victims of what happened last year, not the perpetrators. The perpetrators were the 4 MPD officers who murdered a black man in broad daylight over the course of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The perpetrators are the police who took the opportunity to settle a score with the activists whose irresponsible actions resulted in a week of violence and destruction across our cities. And the perpetrators are those who were out in the streets causing trouble in our neighborhoods, not for justice for George Floyd, but because they saw an opportunity to further provoke political unrest in our country or simply to have a little fun in our expense. So these stories show us who the real heroes were last summer. These heroes were not us politicians, and it was not the police. The heroes were the activists and the community members, those who were on the ground, cleaning up the streets in the morning and protesting at night. It was people like the organizers with the American Indian movement, people like our faith leaders who opened up their places of worship as a sanctuary during a time of great danger. People like the street medics who posted up only a few hundred feet away from burning buildings to make sure that folks who were hurt were treated.
Mr. President.
Senator Johnson, for what reason do you rise?
Point of order.
Please state your point of order, Senator Johnson.
It seems to me that the debate is getting far afield from the question of the bill, the underlying bill. Mason's section 101, paragraph 1. Debate must be confined to the question before the body, and I would like it to pertain to that, please.
Senator Fateh, please continue with your comments, but please make them specific to Senate File 749, which is the bill that we're on. Further
Thank you, Mr.
discussion
President.
on Senate File 749. Senator Fateh.
Thank you, Mr. President. So with this understanding of history, of what actually took place, I implore you, let's come together on public safety. Let's come up with a plan which would empower those who have the community relationships necessary to keep the peace. And let's fund action to keep our streets safe. So the bill in front of us today does not address any of the problems that we saw last year. It changes nothing from last year, because what we saw was the full presence of MPD, and all of our mutual aid agreements together could not keep the peace. The peace was lost when 4 officers decided to take the life of a black man over the crime, or the alleged crime, of a counterfeit $20 bill. And until we get our act together and come up with the political will to confront a broken system of policing, what happened to George Floyd will happen again and again and again. I'm resigned to the fact that given the current political conditions in this legislature, we are unlikely to completely and permanently solve the crisis of unaccountable policing this session, but I do believe that we can work together to keep the peace. And as the elected senator of South Minneapolis, it is my responsibility to remind all of us, all of our members, that it is folks in our community who have envisioned a better way. So please vote no on this bill. Let's stop the games and let's get to work. Thank you.
All right, members, next on the list is Senator Westrom, followed by Senator Dibble. Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I rise and urge your support of this bill to deal with public safety. Let's remind ourselves that local government aid is not to have the state be the full and direct source of public safety for our communities, but it is to supplement and help the communities that don't have the tax base to pay for some of these essential services like public safety. We're here today because Minneapolis, who is the biggest recipient or one of the biggest recipients of local government aid, has many well-intended neighbors that have provided safety in the past when they're needed in Minneapolis to stop the riots, the damage to buildings and injury to people and lives. Those bills are still outstanding. And members, we're here. And Senator Torres Ray, you asked, what do you tell your constituents? We need to tell them the truth. They have an opportunity to speak to their local leaders to change the trajectory they're on of not defunding the police and then expecting all the neighbors to come in and back them up when they need law enforcement or public safety. Now, the state will be there with National Guard and state troopers if needed, but it's not a proper step to defund your police, get rid of your law enforcement or minimize it, and then expect the state to continue bailing you out. And so this bill is a very common sense step forward. LGA, which is intended for public safety to assist our communities that can't afford it. It's not to replace what communities should be doing, it's to assist and augment what they already have in place. But in this case, Minneapolis has went ahead to get rid of their police, make it such a toxic environment that dozens and dozens of officers have resigned or retired from the system. And they've come to the state of Minnesota, Governor Walz, to ask the Minnesota taxpayers to bail them out to the tune of $35 million or more. This bill finds a reasonable compromise, money that's already intended from the state to go to local governments for public safety. And in the event a community like Minneapolis needs the safety and the backup from neighbors, but chooses not to pay them, the state is going to step in and ensure those communities get paid. That's the long and the short of this bill. It doesn't bail out Minneapolis, but it gives Minneapolis and the communities around it a mechanism to get paid if Minneapolis isn't going to do the responsible thing and pay their neighbors when they come to their help. So that's what we tell the constituents of Minneapolis. Go to your local leaders and ask them for public safety. Members, you don't have to look very far in the news clips right now. Last night it was on the news again. Carjackings are at an all-time high in Minneapolis, up hundreds of percent, and it is not safe in Minneapolis right now because of the trajectory and the direction the local officials have put Minneapolis on. Anybody can see the path they're on when you get rid of the police force and then wonder why carjackings at gunpoint are up in Minneapolis. It is dangerous over there. And so, members, this is a reasonable approach. Make sure public safety is funded.
Hold on, please.
Okay.
Senator Dibble. For what reason do you rise?
I believe the comments are to be directed to the bill at hand, and I believe Senator Westrom's comments have gotten pretty far afield.
Members, please keep your comments to the bill. Senator Westrom, please proceed.
And, Mr. President, thank you. And in conclusion, I urge your support of this bill as a very reasonable approach to make sure public safety is there by the neighbors if the community of Minneapolis needs it, and they elect not to pay the neighbors for their help.
Members, Senator Dibble is next on the list, followed by Senator Kiffmeyer. I'm going to give one final reminder. Please keep your comments to Senate File 749. We're on final discussion. Please do not involve personalities or impugn the motives of any other member on the Senate floor, or I will gavel you down. Senator Dibble, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today in sadness. Admittedly, anger as well. But I am sad because yet again, we find ourselves on the floor of the Minnesota Senate trying to fend off only the latest attack on the idea and the ideal that we take care of one another. As Minnesotans, we look out for one another. That, Mr. President, has been the secret to our success as a state. And we've taken that core value, which is shared widely by so many across the vast expanse of this state, and operationalized it, embedded it in the very policies, practices, and allocation of our resources. Mutual aid is when communities, at the first call for help, send personnel and equipment. Just a short time ago, Mr. President, Minneapolis sent its bomb squad to St. Cloud. The Minneapolis and St. Paul bomb squads have responded to several communities across the state in the last few years, from Wilmer to Kimball to Freeport to North Branch to detonate explosives. We're here to help when needed. We don't send a bill. Whenever there's a fire, Mr. President, a big fire in Minneapolis, the neighboring communities send their fire trucks, and vice versa, all the time. Happens practically every day. Local government aid is not just property tax relief. It is a way to make sure that the basic quality of life services and public amenities are funded in every community: libraries, parks, good streets, public safety, and on, so that we don't have incredible differences from community to community. We share in the wealth and prosperity across the state from the state's general fund, and it has the added benefit of making our tax system more fair, more progressive, less reliant on the property tax, which is only loosely related to one's ability to pay. Fiscal disparities in the metropolitan area is a system where our metro region shares in the improvements in commercial industrial property taxes in one community, so that we don't pit ourselves against each other and see each other as competitors. We operate as a coherent and cohesive whole. We take care of one another. Minneapolis is more times than not a donor to the fiscal disparities pool. We have a metro-wide sewer system. We have park systems in the metro area in which we delegate and designate parts of our park system to share with each other, so that we all share in those amazing amenities. And don't get me started on the Highway User Tax Distribution Fund, out of which we pay for state highways, county state aid highways, municipal state aid streets, township roads, and the like. Another place where we share in the prosperity of the state. I'm happy as a taxpayer and a resident of Minneapolis to pay for nice county state aid highways and state highways up in Kitson County, roads that I'll probably never see, but I know are a benefit to the people up there, a benefit to our full state. The legacy funds that we love so much, the sales tax that was designated, shared across the state, not spent in the places necessarily where it's raised, supporting all those many, many MNSCU campuses, obviously can't be supported by the communities that surround them. Those are important, Mr. President. We take care of one another so our young people can thrive and prosper and enjoy a better future. Where does the general fund money come from to support that broad and sprawling MNSCU system? And major institutions that have a statewide reach are disproportionately supported in places like Minneapolis and Hennepin County. The Level 1 Trauma Care Center of HCMC, our convention center, numerous stadiums, serving all comers with no questions. But more importantly, Mr. President, my heart is warmed every time in the news there's some sort of a disaster or tragedy in a community in Minnesota. We see this outpouring of warmth and neighborliness and help. People without hesitation come out of their homes to clean up, to provide food. Mr. President, we pay a lot of attention. Senator Newman had hearings on the unrest. Lots of photos of fires and broken glass done by residents from all of your districts, by the way. But what we didn't see in those videos was as Senator Fateh spoke of earlier, hundreds of my neighbors in Minneapolis turning out the next morning with brooms, with hardware, with food, with diapers. Sanford Middle School had a line so long that it took hours and hours for people to get to the line to drop off food. They had more food than they knew what to do with for people who needed it. That's the real story of Minnesota and Minnesotans in Minneapolis and the tragedy last year. I myself, if I can break my arm, patting my own back here, but it's really about my neighbors. My husband and I put out a quick notice on social media. We were going to match dollars to buy gift certificates at our local hardware store, Fratallone's Ace Hardware. We got thousands of dollars in donations through Venmo. We bought thousands of dollars of $50 and $100 gift certificates. I gave a whole ton of them to my friend, Senator Torres Ray, who in turn gave them to the Latino and Latina-owned businesses in her community. It was amazing. So members, why now and why Minneapolis? I don't know. I will not impugn or question anyone's motives. But I do know this. I do know a lot of you campaign in ways that impugn Minneapolis and create fear of Minneapolis and denigrate the citizens of Minneapolis. Why do I know that? Because I see your campaign literature. And who's featured on that campaign literature? Myself.
Senator Benson, for what reason do you rise?
Mr. President, Senator Dibble did raise a point of order about Senator Westrom keeping directly to the bill. When we are talking about methods of campaigning, it is clearly not keeping to the question before the body.
Senator Dibble, do you have any more comments on Senate File 749?
Yes, Mr. President.
Please continue. Please keep them specific to Senate File 749.
Mr. President, I do know that Senator Jasinski on a videotape recently talked about how his taxpayers' money wasn't going to be going to support those people in Minneapolis. Mr. President, I could hardly believe my ears when I heard that. The kind of division that suggests, but also the mistake of talking about someone's taxpayers' money. Mr. President, the vast majority of those taxes that are raised in Minnesota are raised in Hennepin County and Minneapolis. I'm happy that our tax dollars go and support the fine roads and the institutions through our LGA, through our mutual aid efforts in places like Owatonna, in Dodge County, and places like that, Mr. President. Mr. President, would Senator Gazelka yield?
Senator Gazelka will yield. Senator Dibble.
Mr. President, Senator Gazelka, can you cite any instance in which I or any member of the Minneapolis delegation or the St. Paul delegation, or any member of the DFL caucus for that matter, have opted to malign and impugn those who live in your district or take direct action to deny the funds that support the services your constituents need to support their livelihoods, their safety, or their quality of life.
Senator Gazelka.
Mr. President, Senator Dibble, I'm not sure where you're going, but I did hear a number of people say that it was people from Brainerd and Staples that came down and were the ones doing the damage down in Minneapolis during the riots. I heard the governor and other people here talk about that. Brainerd happens to be Senator Rude's, by the way, but I did see that the numbers actually were that 77% of all arrested people were from the metro area, of which the vast majority were from Minneapolis. 15% were outstate, rural Minnesota, and 5% were out of state, which meant 5 or 6 or 7 people were from out of state. So, you know, but as far as I don't think it's wise, as Senator Dibble, to try to divide between metro, rural, suburban. In my closing comments, I'm going to talk about how we need to figure out a path through this. I do think that the city of Minneapolis is, frankly, a very, very important city for Minnesota. And I'll give more comments at the end, but it really is about the leadership of the city of Minneapolis that people are frustrated with.
Mr. President.
Senator Dibble.
So I'll take that response as a no. Senator Gazelka hasn't heard us do that. We've talked about some instances of individual behaviors that are a matter of public record. Yet Senator Gazelka chose to say in an interview, rural people like to take care of themselves. They're not interested in government helping them. That's their last resort. In the inner city, it's different. There's higher concentrations of people that are on welfare, creating a vast characterization of people who live in districts like mine. That's divisive, Mr. President. And it ignores the fact that A, there's a higher per capita amount of public dollars that go to support the folks who live in Senator Gazelka's district than in mine, and B, those dollars come from my district. But bottom line, Mr. President, I'm glad for that. I'm glad to support LGA, and I'm glad to support mutual aid, and I'm glad to support all the other efforts we make all together as a state for the health and prosperity of everyone in Minnesota. And this bill achieves the opposite, and it's corrosive. And we can do better, Mr. President. Thank you.
Final discussion on Senate File 749. Senator Kiffmeyer, followed by Senator Murphy. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I do want to just clarify something in particular here, though, realizing that the bomb squad reference is paid for by the taxpayers of Minnesota for the benefits of all Minnesotans. And in general, also realizing that Minneapolis has it's large, it does have a lot of people, a lot of activities, but it is rural Minnesota that feeds the state of Minnesota. Their farming, their grains, the husbandry, fruits and vegetables, wind power, solar power, many things to the benefit of the entire state of Minnesota. But in regards to this particular bill, Senate File 749, I think it's important to remember what is not in this bill. This bill does not decrease local government aid to anybody whatsoever in the state of Minnesota. This bill, Senate File 749, does not decrease any local government aid. This bill, Senate File 749, does not decrease or affect county programming aid. Senate File 749 does deal with an entity that does not pay its bills owed. Mutual aid means mutual. It goes back and forth. But there are times when the aid is so great that there needs to be compensation. And if that compensation is not paid, in this case, prospectively, possibly by the city of Minneapolis, then those other counties or other local municipalities are forced to pay for what rightly should be paid for by a city like Minneapolis, which is huge and just is the economic engine. So certainly they must have enough money to pay their bills. So I think it's really important to just recognize again, though, this bill, Senate File 749, does not decrease local government aid, does not change the formula, and does not affect county programming aid. This bill does affect a city or an entity that does not pay its bills owed, and that is it. And if you pay your bills, again, this has no effect on you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Final discussion on Senate File 749, Senator Murphy, followed by Senator Rosen. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I just wanted to just make a brief comment, and since my name was mentioned on the floor, I'd like to vindicate my name. Senator Torres Ray said that I was she couldn't get a hold of me. We had a brief conversation. There has been no communication with either office. She called yesterday on Valentine's Day. I have not returned her phone call, but we have an appointment Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
All right, so Senator Murphy did decline. So next we have Senator Franzen, followed by Senator Herr. And we'll give Senator Franzen a moment to get on the floor because I did not give her an on-deck notice. So Senator Franzen, followed by Senator Herr. Senator Franzen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. So I was not planning to speak, and I honestly have been really disappointed with the debate on the floor today. So I was compelled to say a few words, not because everything hasn't been said, but because not all of us have said it. The notion of local government aid being described as a debt or being using the concept of a debt owed or being utilized as a tool where you can treat it as a debt, well, LGA is not founded on that principle. It's not founded on the principle of owing a debt. It's actually based on the principle that communities across the state can afford their own infrastructure, public safety, schools, the concept that we help each other out because not all districts have that capability. That's why local metro communities, like the ones I represent in SD 49, subsidize the spending that happens across our state. It's by design, by people before us who thought that we all do better when we all do better. When communities like Bloomington, who at one point were the #1 contributor to fiscal disparities, now is bumped by Minneapolis, it means that districts that are close to the airport, that have a great industrial base, great property tax base, that they actually contribute to the pot where we help each other out. It's a notion that not all of us can stand on our own 2 feet, that we recognize that communities across the state need to be supported because it helps all of us. And I have a business in Minneapolis that I frankly haven't stepped foot at for many reasons, but partly because it's in an area that was in the midst of the civil unrest. And I like to go back to my business, and I like to be feeling safe in my neighborhood, like all of us want to be safe in ours. So to use LGA as a tool or as this penalty that we're going to penalize an area of the state that can't stand on its own 2 feet if a major catastrophe happens, say an earthquake, say a flood, what we've talked about all day today. Not every district is ready for that emergency. Not every community that we represent is ready for that emergency. That's why we have the mutual aid agreements. But LGA, voting for this bill, members, is actually doing something greater that I don't think it's the intent of the author, quite frankly, and I'm not impugning their intent, but we're reading the fine print. And when a community is cut off from LGA, they have to make choices. And those choices are cutting and defunding. Yes, defunding the things that they pay with this local government aid. So in essence, I look forward to seeing my Republican friends defund their police, defund schools, defund healthcare in their local communities, because that is what this bill does. Don't be fooled. I think an hour into debate, there was a post on social media by the majority leader, and it read, and I quote, "Watch, Republicans bring forward a bill makes sure Minneapolis takes care of Minneapolis and pays their bills." Well, again, members, if that is the intent of this bill, I think it falls short. Because if that's the case, communities like Minneapolis can stand on its own 2 feet, and they can pay their own bills if they keep their money within their borders. And I don't think that's the intent of what this bill, or at least what I've been hearing from the majority side today. But if you're getting letters from Greater Minnesota cities and all these associations and that represent cities and counties saying, don't do this, it's because the effect is defunding them. So, members, again, I don't know how someone who represents Rochester will want to defund Rochester, and I'm just picking on Rochester because it's one of our prized rural communities where Greater Minnesota, that, you know, we have our prized Mayo Clinic. Would the city of Rochester want to be cut off from local government aid, even if they might be a contributor? They might be. Members, my point is, if you're trying to make a point, this is not the point you're trying to make. This bill doesn't do that. This bill actually defunds Greater Minnesota. So members, I look forward to seeing who's going to vote for this, because you will be held accountable for that vote. And let's not forget that if Minneapolis and Bloomington and Rochester don't thrive, the rest of the state doesn't thrive either. This is an economy. We don't stop at the borders. Pretty much every suburban community helped Minneapolis out in this unrest, because we all were experiencing the same unrest in our communities. We can't escape emergencies. We can be there for each other. We can value public service. And frankly, we just have to demonize one another. And that's what I was so compelled to say. I do not feel proud about the debate on this floor where our amendments were not entertained, because nobody wants to have the debate. We just want to score for our own side. And I don't think that's what a lot of us came here to do, especially the new members who I'm sure are frustrated with this floor debate today. So members, vote your conscience, but in essence, voting for this bill is defunding your communities all over the state. Thank you.
Next, we have Senator Herr, followed by Senator Dietzig. Senator Herr.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be short, and perhaps because of my trait as a small business owner. Avoid all complexity, avoid bureaucracy, and get to the point and get things done. But today we hear a bill that I think is leading to a dead end. There's no hearing in the House, and perhaps the governor, I don't know what his decision will be. And I think we just wasted several hours of our time. I wish we had spent this many hours debating on COVID-19 relief or debating on the Promise Act to help damaged businesses, to help us rebuild again. And this is a time, there's no better time than now to rebuild what has been damaged. And many of those damaged businesses are built by hardworking Americans. Americans who are people of color and indigenous. Americans that are immigrants, that hold their business through many generations. And now they're suffering. But today, we spend time arguing over a Republican-led bill, Senate File 749, to add extra layer of bureaucracy. And to my surprise, extra layer of bureaucracy. And this bill also penalizes local government aid that will take money from public safety across our state. And that means taking funds from our police and our firefighter. And who's doing that now? So members, I cannot vote for this bill. I ask you to join me as well. Thank you.
Members, we still have a growing list of members who would like to speak. Next is Senator Dietzick, followed by Senator Nelson. Senator Dietzick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to stand to kind of make some clarifications from what I've heard as I've been listening. And we often talk about local control here. We often talk about how important it is for local control. And, sometimes communities do things because they are in some ways closer to the public than we are, and they are dealing with a lot of day-to-day issues, and so they make decisions based on what they are hearing from their communities. And I just want to clarify for the record that the City of Minneapolis, the City Council, did vote to add approximately $6.4 million, or use $6.4 million to hire 2 additional recruit classes to backfill the police officers. Minneapolis had about 888 FTEs a year ago. We still have 888 FTEs for law enforcement. We have had retirements, like communities across the state. Minneapolis' budget was impacted by COVID, and so the city offered early retirement to a wide variety of people, and several police officers did take early retirement. Several others have also been impacted by PTSD and are out on leave. So we are short police officers right now, and this recruit class will hopefully help fill in that gap. There's also been a lot of talk about, to some degree, about bailing out Minneapolis. And so I just want to, for the record, say that the businesses in Minneapolis, and the most recent data that I found on the DOR website was in 2018. So businesses in Minneapolis collected about $712 million in sales and use tax. $712 million. Certified LGA for the entire state in 2018 was $534 million. Minneapolis gets about $77 million in LGA. That is more than others based on the population. Minneapolis has about 100,000 more residents than the next city. So just based on that population and the number of jobs that we have in Minneapolis, we do get a large number, but we are not the most per capita. We are not even at 178 per capita. We are not anywhere near we're below the middle. Senator Weber, who's the author of the bill, his community of Worthington gets 332.92 cents per capita. And there are several other communities that get up to the 600, 700 per capita. So Minneapolis per capita is quite low compared to several other communities. But when you're talking about mutual aid and you're talking about local government, it is all to help local government and to help our communities, to help our constituents. Mutual aid allows our local governments to be efficient. They don't have to buy additional purchases, or they don't have to have enough firefighters on hand to fight a fire in like the weather we have today. So instead of having 20 firefighters, they maybe only have to have 10 because they know they can call in other communities. Mutual aid saves money. And it helps communities large and small. It helps a lot of suburban communities. We often see fires in the news where they have to call in other firefighters to help. From suburban fires to the fire in Becker earlier this year. We don't know what the impact of this bill will have. When we change tax policy, it sometimes can change taxpayer behavior. So this bill may have a chilling effect, and it is garnishing the taxpayers. It is garnishing the taxpayers that we represent. As I mentioned before, and Senator Eakin mentioned, the League of Minnesota Cities, Association of Minnesota Counties, and the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities all have serious concerns about this bill. I have not heard of any community step up and say, we want this bill. There are already dispute resolutions in place if they have disagreements on the bill that they can work out. And as I will reiterate what I said earlier, I am aware of 3 bills that the city is working on and in conversations to pay those bills. Members, this bill divides us. It is a slippery slope of what we're going to tell them that they have to use LGA and CPA to pay next. We need to be leaders. In this moment, we need to stand up and help unite our state and help unite our community. We need to lift everybody up. With that, I ask for a no vote on this bill.
Next on the list, we have Senator Nelson, followed by Senator Pratt. Senator Nelson declines. We have Senator Pratt will be next, followed by Senator Senjum. We'll give Senator Pratt a moment to get to the floor. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I wasn't expecting to speak on this bill today either, but there's been quite a few comments around this, and I find the debate that we've been having on this floor quite distressing. Members, this is not a bill to punish Minneapolis. Nowhere in this bill does it mention Minneapolis. This is a bill that says, that gives local governments the ability to collect from another local government and an additional tool to be able to do it. That's all it is. If one municipality receives mutual aid and the bills have been requested and they go unpaid, they have an option to collect. That's what this bill does. Senator Weber's bill does nothing else but that. Nobody is being penalized. We've heard Minneapolis is being penalized. Nowhere in this bill does it say Minneapolis is being penalized. And I just want to thank the men and women of the National Guard and the State Patrol and all of our law enforcement that have stood up and protected the cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, this Capitol, on numerous occasions. And for us to start to politicize violence from the left, violence from the right, it came from this city, it came from that city, that is beneath the dignity of the Senate. We are here to settle a dispute between 2 municipalities or 2 government entities. That's what Senate File 746 does, or 749 does, and that's why I'll be supporting it. And let's just, members, I hope we can put away the charged rhetoric on some of this. It's beneath our dignity. Thank you.
Next on the list is Senator Senjum, followed by Senator Kent. Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I just want to tag on to the former comments I just heard, because that's basically what I want to say as well. This is a pay your bills bill. That's all it is. It's not specific to Minneapolis. It's pay your bills bill. If you enter into a written agreement with another city and you don't follow through with that agreement, if it involves remuneration, then you're going to come to the state of Minnesota and they're going to fix it for you. That is absolutely all this bill is. It's a pay your bills bill, or if you don't, it's going to be taken out of your local government aid and it's going to be paid that way. So if Rochester enters into agreement with Byron, Casson, Pine Island, Yoda, whatever, into a written agreement where it says, we'll do this, but you pay us this, that bill's not paid, those cities have an opportunity to come to the state of Minnesota and get that bill paid through Rochester's local government aid. I think that's ultimately very, very fair. It's right. And it's a kind of a bill, I think, unfortunately, we need it at this point in time. You'd like to think we didn't, but we need it at this point in time, and I'd certainly urge support for it.
Next, we have Senator Kent, followed by Senator Weber. Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I start with what I was going to say, I want to address a few things that have been said just in the past few minutes. Because it is about this bill, but these remarks were said on the floor, and I feel it is important to address them. To act as if members of the minority are bringing up out of whole cloth us versus them, rural versus metro, as if this has never been brought up before, is beyond dishonest. And I know Senator Benson said earlier that she is not crazy about us talking about campaign materials, but we have to acknowledge that the dialogue about these issues has gone on and on and on, and put us into this unhealthy discussion about us versus them. What's mine is mine, what yours is I don't care about. That is not who we are as Minnesotans. And we here in this chamber should aspire to better than that. I have the great privilege of representing Senate District 53, which I think is an interesting case study relevant to Senate File 749. I represent the city of Woodbury. I represent Landfall. I represent Southern Oakdale and South Maplewood. They're all very different. Each of them is very different. And when I look across 67 desks in this chamber, and I think about the 67 individuals who would be sitting here if we could all be sitting here, we each represent collections of communities that are very different from each other's. It happens in the case of my district, Woodbury, which is often a surprise to people to hear that Woodbury is now the 8th largest city in the state of Minnesota, doesn't get a penny of LGA. Oakdale gets a little, and South Maplewood gets a fair amount. Maplewood does. It's interesting when you think about this issue of mutual aid, and I'm so glad we've had a conversation about it, because mutual aid is who Minnesota is. It is what we're about. It is what we do well. Anytime I'm driving around Woodbury or parts of Washington County and you run across some sort of public emergency and there are fire trucks available or police vehicles and ambulances, whatever, it's never just the city of Woodbury. There's always somebody from Cottage Grove there, or there's somebody from Oakdale there. When you think about the makeup of my district, South Maplewood, this is always a sort of a funny conversation for people. The city of Maplewood, if you look at it on a map, is really strange. There's a big chunk of it in the northeast metro that is represented by Senator Uyghur. And then there's this skinny little panhandle of South Maplewood that drops down several miles. It's only 1 mile wide. And on the west side of it is St. Paul, and on the east side of it is Woodbury. And you want to talk about mutual aid? To service those communities, they work together seamlessly every single day of the week. St. Paul, Maplewood, Woodbury, 2 different counties, 3 different cities, all to make sure that we're taking care of the people who live in that area. Because fundamentally, we are Minnesotans first. And that's what we do. Senate File 749 has a bunch of problems. And that is why we have heard over and over again that all of the city organizations and the Association of Minnesota Counties oppose it because they understand what's at risk here. They have all said that they have not been able to find significant examples of unpaid bills or unresolved disputes between cities. Senator Dietzick has talked about that there is a bill that was sent forward from Anoka that is being discussed and considered. It is not unpaid. It is still in action within a reasonable timeline. This is not a big problem that is out there that is needing this bill in this moment. But what does this bill do? It adds bureaucracy to deal with it. It fundamentally interferes with our local communities' ability to do what they need to do to serve their communities. It fundamentally interferes with funding for public safety, law enforcement, fire, and other emergency services. It fundamentally interferes with the ability of local governments to lower property taxes, which is very important to the members of our communities. If you think about a small town that, God forbid, in the coming year has a tornado, and they're not able to, and the neighboring communities come to their aid in an emergency situation, and they're not able to pay that bill right away, you know, this bill could potentially cause their LGA to be held back in order to pay for those things, which means that town now may have one less law enforcement officer the following year. Or they may have to shut their library down a couple days a week, because that's what these funds are used for. Members, this bill is wrong for Minnesota. This is not who we are. When I listen to Minnesotans and my community and around the state talk about what they want us to be doing when we are in this chamber, they want us to be working together, not this us against them back and forth. And they want us as local leaders and state leaders to work together as well, which is what the amendment that Senator Murphy brought up forward would have done as an alternative. It would have brought people together to talk and to find solutions together. But no, we're gonna pursue this one. This has not been a healthy discussion, and I'm so disappointed in that, because we can do so much better. We should be listening to each other and working together. We should take care of each other. It's what Minnesotans do. Here we are in this really cold weather. I'm sure Minnesotans around this state are taking care of their neighbors' driveways and mail and deliveries and dogs in this time, because it's what we do. We show up with a hot dish when there's been a death in the family, because it's what we do. It's who we are. Senator Dibble mentioned the hearings that were held last summer by Senator Newman and Senator Limmer, where we talked a lot about what happened in the metro, because let's be clear, what happened last year was not just in Minneapolis. It was also in St. Paul, and it was right across the street from my district, literally right across the street from my district. The thing I most remember, the thing that will stick with me forever from those hearings, was when Colonel Matt Langer of the State Patrol testified. And he talked about when they put out the call around the state, and that sheriff's offices from all corners dropped everything to help. Mr. Rogers says when there's something scary going on, look for the helpers. And that's what Minnesotans did in that occasion. That's what we do. That's what we hopefully always will do. But Senate File 749, this bill before us, is the opposite of who we are and the opposite of what we do. And members, I would encourage a no vote on this bill.
Next is Senator Weber, followed by Senator Gazelka. Senator Weber.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've heard a lot of comments made today, and I understand that there is a lot of passion around this issue. A few of the comments that I'd like to respond to are these. It was stated at one point that this was a solution in search of a problem. But I would remind everyone that the problem was brought to us by the governor. The governor talked to leadership and said that it was a problem that they were having trouble getting the mutual aid agreements to be re-signed because there were communities that were concerned about whether or not they would be paid. So I guess there is a problem, and this, quite frankly, is a solution. We've had a lot of discussion today about local government aid, and again, I wish to repeat that this bill does not change the formula in any way, shape, or form. It was indicated by one of the Metro senators that they take criticism when they support rural Minnesota. I know how they feel, Mr. President, because I take criticism from some people back home when I support Metro Minnesota. It is an issue that we each face within our respective districts. I remember some years ago when I voted against an amendment to take local government aid away from metro cities. At that time, Senator Dietzig came back to me and thanked me for voting that way. She recognized that there would be people in my district that agreed with that, and yet we all understand that local government aid is an element that was created to provide some type of commonality and a community's ability to provide basic services to their citizens. Yes, maybe some of the cities in my district get a more per capita, but we also have to remember that local government aid is based on much more, Mr. President, than simply population. It's based on property wealth, on the ability to tax, based on your tax base for the essential services that every community requires. And so, as we talk about all those issues, we can also talk about what created the request from the governor for funds. And I'm not going to get into that today, but I do believe, Mr. President, that Senate File 749 basically offers a very basic solution to the problem as to who has to pay for a mutual aid agreement that a community is obligated to pay. And I believe that it is a fair manner in which to address the issue. As Senator Sinzum said, it's just a bill that says who's going to pay the bill. And so, Mr. President, I would encourage a yes vote on Senate File 749. Thank you very much.
Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, very good debate. I think it's important that we have these kind of debates working through the issues. This is a very, very important issue for Minnesota. And I did want to address a couple things about local government aid because we are passing legislation related to it. But I think local government aid is important to many of us in this body here. It was 2003. I actually remembered the date. I was surprised, but that was when local government aid was reduced during the Great Recession. And ever since I've been here, started in 2011, people would ask me, when are you going to return local government aid to those original numbers? When are you going to get us back to that place? And I'm proud to say in the last budget that I had oversight over, we finally returned local government aid to the original percent or numbers back from 2003. And so we accomplished something that many people asked for. And I only bring that up to say most of us think that local government aid is very, very important, and we are doing nothing in this bill to change the formula, not one thing. All we're saying is if you don't pay your bill, and it takes a while for it to catch up to you, that we're going to help you pay your bill. That's all it does. Doesn't change the formula in one bit. But I guess the question is why we're going this route. And I heard one of the speakers, Senator Eakin, talk about this could affect money that goes to floods in his area, and I'm thinking, no, it doesn't. That was the disaster relief fund that the governor raided for the riots, which I thought was wrong. You are correct when you say, I've heard you say we're not going to bail out Minneapolis. I think that's correct. But I think if I want to nuance that a little bit more clearly, what I hear from people is not so much about bailing out Minneapolis, but not bailing out the city leadership of Minneapolis. I think people care about all the small businesses that were damaged in the riots, 1,500 of them damaged or destroyed. I think people care about the residents that had to protect themselves by their own weapons, by their own gathering of groups against the marauders that were destroying everything. I think people across the state care deeply about those folks. But they are very, very frustrated with the city of Minneapolis, the leadership, that over and over and over talked about defunding the police. And worse than that, on a regular basis spoke terribly about them. So if you think about why they weren't having a hard time signing those mutual aid agreements, it wasn't really just first and foremost about the money and will they get paid, these other communities, these other police groups. Why weren't they signing the mutual aid agreements? Well, it's because they were so ill-treated during those riots, not just by the rioters and the protesters, but by the city of Minneapolis, the leadership. That's the underlying problem when people say we don't want to bail out Minneapolis, when the city leadership a year ago, January, the police asked for 400 more police. This is pre-riots, pre-COVID. They asked for 400 more and they didn't get any, and now we're down 200 from that period. And so cutting $8 million out of their budget and then wanting people to come back and help pay that, that's the underlying issue. So, but this bill simply says if you're not paying your underlying bill, then we're going to help you pay that. Here's the good news, and I think this is important for all of Minnesota to know. It was mentioned that the city of Minneapolis has now kicked back in $6 million towards police, towards hiring more police. That's a great first step. Now we're going to work with the House, and we could come to an agreement with the House. The problem is some of the representatives over there don't want this just to be about taking care of some of the needs that the police have for all of our public safety, but they want to bring in some things that they think should be reformed. And that'll be a non-starter, and we won't get anywhere if that's the direction they go. But no matter what happens, we're going to pass this today, I believe, but no matter what happens, we are committed to making sure that the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the entire state are safe. And so we're committed to whatever is needed from the Highway Patrol or the National Guard, we are going to make sure that they're there. And I am certain that many communities will, whether they have a mutual aid agreement or not, if needed, they will come. They will come to help. And I do agree that all of us in this body should be thinking about the entire state. So I've told you my commitment to Minneapolis and St. Paul. We got to find a way for these small businesses that were destroyed, that are asking for help. I'm willing to find a way, but it will not be through dollars to the city of Minneapolis that's dysfunctional. But I'm open to trying to look forward to that. But we also should be looking to the Iron Range. What about the mining up there that so many in here have stopped? When that's something we hear from them that they need. Each part of the state is asking for certain things, and we all need to listen so we can figure out how to work together. We can do that. So, but this is our step towards saying we recognize the riot could happen, and we want to make sure if we have a large enough force, we stop them before they really get started. So this is an easy green vote.
Members, we are on final passage of Senate File 749. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. Members in the retiring room, please come to the chamber to vote. Retiring room. Members in room 303 and the President's office, please come to the chamber to vote. Room 303 and the President's office. Members in room 323, please come to the chamber to vote, as well as members in rooms 237 and 206. Please come to the chamber to vote. I will call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. The members, just remember we are under roll call vote. Please take your discussions outside the chamber. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes no.
Carlson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes no.
Champion votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Clausen votes no.
Clausen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes no.
Eaton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes no.
Isaacson votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Klein votes no.
Klein votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Franzen votes no.
Franzen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes no.
Latz votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Marty votes no.
Marty votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator McEwen votes no.
McEwen votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes no.
Newton votes no. Senator Frentz.
Senator Pappas votes no.
Pappas votes no. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Wickland votes no.
Wickland votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Anderson votes aye.
Anderson votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Lang votes aye.
Lang votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Eichhorn votes aye.
Eichhorn votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Osmick votes aye.
Osmick votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 35 ayes and 32 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Next, we'll move to the 13th order of business, announcements of Senate interest. I know we have a few announcements. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Judiciary Committee, which normally starts at 1 o'clock to 2:30, did not meet today, nor will it, and we'll try and make up our agenda sometime in the future.
Senator Chamberlain.
Senate K-12 Finance Policy will meet about 15 minutes after end of session. Thank you.
Senator Benson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Health and Human Services will meet 15 minutes after adjournment.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jobs and Economic Growth will be meeting at 3:20.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Agriculture Committee will meet 15 minutes after session adjourns.
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commerce and Consumer Protection will meet 15 minutes after the end of the session.
Any other announcements of Senate interest? Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, just one quick thing. Without naming names, for the second time now I've been accused of not having an appointment, that I would just say you have to call me to have an appointment. And so, in fact, I want to make that invitation to anyone that freshman Democrats or anybody else, if for some reason you want to see me, please call me. I'm more than willing to see anybody. The door is open. Every one of us represents a piece of Minnesota. You have an important piece that you have to talk to me about if there's something I need to see. But you have to call to make an appointment. Don't just assume I can read anybody's mind. So, Mr. President, with that, I move the Senate do now adjourn until Wednesday, February 17th at 12 noon.
Senator Gazelka moves that the Senate do now adjourn until Wednesday, February 17th at 12 noon. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. The Senate is adjourned.